I've spent over half a century trying to convey an idea that I think important for us to recognize explains why civilization has developed as it has. That explains, and more particularly, why the course of things has been as destructive and tormented as it has been. One new way I've come upon for trying to convey it. It's not the greatest, but it's a good way of getting people to think, I think, is to ask, what kind of world do you think people would choose to live in? And then when that contrasts so sharply with the kind of world we've actually got, to ask, how do you explain that? And for example, I'm going to assert, I haven't done survey research, but I think if you ask people, would you rather live in a world set by wars or a world at peace? Would you like to live in a world where people are full of hate or full of love? Would you like to live in a world where justice prevails or one that's pervaded by injustice? I feel confident that people would choose not the broken side of those dichotomies, not war and hatred and injustice, but their opposites. That people would like to live in a world where we've got the conditions that lead to human thriving. The pursuit of happiness. What is the route to human happiness? It's a world where those more whole things like love and justice and peace and other dichotomies that we could put out there, where they characterize the way things are. So then the question, of course, is, well, how do you explain why the world is so different from what people would choose? Now, I recognize that one could come up with alternative explanations to the one that I propose. You might say, well, people don't, might say, again, I haven't got proof of what they would say, but I feel pretty confident. You might say, even if people would say they prefer peace to war, and they prefer justice to injustice, and love to hate, even if that were the case, and even if they think they're being sincere, that's not really what people want. I don't buy that, but we certainly do see certain kinds of twistedness in the human world. I feel like I have ways of explaining that, but I think that if people had truly been able to choose all along how the civilized world would develop, it would be in the direction of wholeness, way more than what we see. Now, I say the ugliness we see in human history is not human nature writ large, because I think I've identified a force that arises with civilization. But anyway, you could imagine that people think they want one thing but really want another. Another possible explanation, which I think has a little bit more validity to it, is that they might like to have a world which is ruled by justice, but what people want for themselves creates a world in which there are conflicting desires, and not all of them can be met. And so not everybody has the same concept of what they're entitled to. And so you're going to have conflict more than people might want. And I think that there's a fair amount of truth to that. Not nearly enough to explain the discrepancy between the world that people, I would say, would prefer and the world that we've got and have had for the last 10,000 years as civilization has emerged. Another possible explanation that I think has something to it, that even if there weren't any systemic forces that I claim are the heart of the explanation. We human beings have been creating a new kind of life form, not one that's been shaped by eons of natural selection, which tend to create synergy and viability for the long term. But we're having to invent things to engineer a way of organizing the world to make the world the way we want it to be. And that's just hard. We're in an experiment that life has been conducting that's new, and you don't just easily create something that's going to work just the way you wanted it to. I mean, Edison, tried 10,000 different ways of creating a filament that would give him the light bulb. And what we've got with climate change now, aside from the kinds of corruption that have prevented our civilization from responding appropriately, the fact that we've got a problem like that illustrates that when people started burning, the Industrial Revolution, they're burning coal, then they're burning oil, fossil fuel products. They didn't know that they were going to be producing a crisis like we see nowadays. And there's going to be plenty of those things with the rise of a civilization. But I think that the main reason lies elsewhere, that the emergence of civilization creates a new situation. It's a situation which is inevitably going to be disorderly. And it is a situation in which is a particular kind of disorder that results in a selective process, not for what best meets human needs, but for maximizing the power of civilized societies that are engaged in an inevitable war of all against all. And that selective process means that the ways of power, which I also sometimes try to capture with the phrase, the spirit of the gangster, will play a disproportionate role in how civilization develops. That's what I claim is the main reason why, though we want peace and love and justice, we have not yet found a way to organize our world so that we get what we want. And that's why I say that the ugliness we see in human history is not human nature. And that's why I say that any creature on any planet, anywhere in the cosmos, that steps out of the biologically evolved niche in which it emerged and onto the path of civilization, inventing its own way of life, is going to find itself inevitably swept up in a social evolutionary process, which, at least for the first large portion of the history of that creature's civilization, is going to be condemned to have the ways of power, the spirit of the gangster, dictate how it's going to develop. A disproportionate portion of the determinants of how that civilization will develop will be not of human choosing, not of the creatures choosing on some other planet, but will be dictated by the dynamics, inevitable dynamics that accompany the emergence of civilization. And if you're interested in seeing whether I can prove that, and I claim to basically prove it, prove may be a little bit strong, but not very strong, I suggest that you can find that laid out in a, I think, compelling way for over a half century. I have not seen any gaps in the reasoning on my website, abetterhumanstory.org. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.